If you're here for XRP, Ripple, institutional adoption, tokenization, and the next wave of the crypto cycle, you are exactly where you need to be. Smash that like button, subscribe, and let's get into it because I'm telling you, this week is one of those weeks we'll look back on to remember. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you've got a giant steel spring. The more you compress it, the more pressure it builds, the more energy gets stored until eventually it snaps forward. That's exactly what XRP looks like right now. And here's what most people do not understand. The longer something is held down by uncertainty, regulation, doubt, sideways price action, the more violent the move can be when that pressure releases is absolutely insane. This isn't new. This is actually just history. This is the exact point what happened with gold when it was restrained by policy until it wasn't anymore. This is what happened when the internet was laughed at until it wasn't anymore. This is what happened when Apple was just a quote unquote a computer company until it wasn't anymore. It's the same thing every single time. It's always the same movie. First, they ignore it. Then they mock it, then they fight it, and then they pretend they believed in it the whole entire time. And XRP is entering that next chapter right now because the narrative is shifting from is XRP even real to now something like how big, can XRP get once it's plugged into the machine? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's talk about what's quietly happening behind the scenes. Ripple isn't playing the same game as most crypto projects. Most projects are trying to go viral. Ripple, on the other hand, is trying to go on the regulated path because institutions don't move billions of dollars or even trillions of dollars through quote unquote like cool projects. It has to be real infrastructure with XRP. They move money through systems that have approvals, frameworks, compliance, and even accountability. Think of it like this. Retail wants speed. That's all retail wants. Retail wants everything right now, but institutions, they demand guarantees. It's the difference between, street racing and commercial, aviation. One looks exciting and really cool, and then one is just how the system works. And that's why regulatory footholds matter so much. Because every time Ripple expands its license footprint, it's not just good news. It's another brick laid in the road that leads to scale. And scale is everything here because once you can run cross-border payments end to end, you're no longer just a crypto company anymore. You are a financial utility. You are now a pipeline, and pipelines don't care about opinions. Pipelines care about throughput. They care about volume. Now, here's where it gets really crazy because most people still think crypto is just coins, memes, charts, pump cycles, but the biggest wealth transfer in this space is not going to come from just memes. It's going to come from settlement. Let me explain here. The old system is like sending a fax in 2026. It works, but it's slow, expensive, and outdated. Cross-border payments can take days. Fees are high. The process is messy all over the place. And you know what that creates? A giant opportunity because when the world upgrades the rails, the winner isn't whoever screams the loudest. The winner actually is whoever becomes the standard connector. And XRP's entire identity is built exactly around that: fast settlement, liquidity bridge, global interoperability. And the part that most people don't fully process yet is this. Guys, listen, because this is super important. The future is not just one currency. The future is many currencies: digital dollars, digital euros, digital everything. A world full of tokenized assets, tokenized treasuries, tokenized stocks, tokenized bonds, and eventually tokenized real estate. And when you live in a world like that, you don't need more coins. You need more connections because every new tokenized system becomes like another city and you need highways in between them. XRP is trying to be that highway to connect them all. Let's make this very simple here. Imagine 180 different countries, each builds their own railroad track, but every track is a different width. One country's train doesn't fit on the next country's track. So what happens? Trade becomes slow, complex, expensive. That's basically the financial system we live in today. Different, currencies, different rules, different banking systems. Now imagine there's just one universal connector right here, a bridge asset that makes conversation and instant settlements. Now, suddenly, all those tracks become compatible. That's the concept of iterability. And why is this narrative keeps on coming back into the conversation? Because even if you hate XRP or you don't like it, or if you don't even hold it, or you even panic sold it a while back, you cannot deny the problem here, that Ripple is trying to solve. And that's what institutions care about, not the drama, not the tribal wars, but the problem and the actual solution that Ripple is trying to solve here through XRP. Now, let's talk about the word that's becoming the biggest keyword in finance right now, and that is tokenization. Tokenization is being used by all of the biggest institutions in the world. Tokenization is basically turning real world assets into digital assets that can move instantly. Think about it like this: the old world is physical paperwork, the new world is instant settlement. And when the old world turns into the new world, you don't just get faster transactions, you get a complete transformation of clearance, settlement, delivery, versus payment, risk management, liquidity access. This is why institutions are rushing in. And the people who don't understand that are going to be shocked, because you cannot stop this train. You can only decide whether you're on it or just watching it pass by. And here's the key line right here: when tokenization scales, liquidity is going to become oxygen. Everything needs liquidity. And this is where XRP enters the chat. Let me hit you with the part that most people gloss over: finality. In finance, finality is everything, because almost settled doesn't exist when you're moving serious amounts of money. Either the transaction is final or it's going to be a risk. That's why the settlement gap has always been dangerous. The gap introduces risk into the settlement, and institutions hate risk. Now, picture the world moving toward near instant settlement. That gap actually shrinks, risk shrinks, efficiency explodes, and then suddenly the system starts looking at assets differently, not just as investments to make money, but actual utility. This is why you keep hearing the same exact theme: we're approaching the tipping point, because, once the environment is right, the shift happens faster than anyone expects. Here's the best metaphor for what, I believe is happening in the world right now. It's like a city preparing to, switch the power grid. You don't see months of planning. You don't see the underground cables being, upgraded and plugged in. You don't see the approvals and the coordination. You only see the moment when the switch flips to the public, but you don't see what's going on behind the scenes. And suddenly the whole city changes. The whole city was like, whoa, what is this? And that's exactly what infrastructure looks like with these institutions and for XRP. And if XRP is connected to that move, then it's not going to just climb, politely. It's going to have a complete reprice, and that's going to be so fast. And when people finally realize what's happening, they're going to react emotionally. And emotionally buying is what creates vertical candles. That's when, the priced out effect begins. Now let's address the number $5. Some people hear $5 and they're like, they're laughing. They're like, bro, XRP can't move to $1 without resistance. It can't get to $2, can't get to $3. We've heard it all, right? I understand the skepticism, but you have to separate two things: slow retail markets, fast liquidity events. Retail moves based on sentiment. Liquidity moves based on demand for utility. You guys have to understand that. If the market enters a phase where XRP becomes heavily utilized as a bridge, that changes the equation. That doesn't, mean it happens overnight, but it does mean the ceiling gets higher, because once liquidity demand enters, price behaves differently. That's why you see these sudden moves in the markets. It's not random. It's participation shifting from small buyers to now bigger flows. And if a true breakout happens, $5 becomes a psychological magnet, because once it starts trending, people don't buy based on logic. They buy based on something called FOMO, fear of missing out. Let's go historically for a second. Back in the day, trade depended on waterways. Whoever controlled the canals controlled the flow of wealth. Then railroads came, then highways came. Every time infrastructure evolved, the winners weren't the loudest companies. The winners were actually the ones who controlled the routes. And today, the route is digital value transfer. The route is, liquidity, or the route, it could be also settlement. If XRP plays a serious role in that route, then it's not competing for your favorite meme coin. It's competing to be a part of the plumbing. And plumbing always wins because when the pipes are the pipes, everything else depends on them. Now let's bring it back to price for XRP. And I'm not here to scream random numbers at you. I'm here to give you the actual logical information. When XRP compresses and climbs towards resistance, you're looking for two key things right here: a clean break off key levels, volume confirmation, because a breakout without volume is honestly just a fake breakout. People call that a fake out, but a breakout with volume, that is ignition right there. Think of it like gasoline being fueled into a car. That's where the slingshot that people like to say analogy becomes real. And when XRP clears that zone, it can create the kind of move where, people start chasing. And when people chase, you get rapid expansion. The market is literally built for exactly this: compression, breakout, momentum, FOMO, like we said before, fear of missing out, and acceleration. That's the cycle. And XRP is sitting in the compressing stage right now. Now, listen, this part matters more than charts because what destroys people in crypto isn't lack of knowledge, it's regret. Regret comes from knowing you saw the setup and you actually ignored it. You told yourself you had time. You told yourself you'd buy later. You told yourself you'd, wait for confirmation. And then it runs 40% in a day and you're sitting there like, wow, I missed out. I should have bought. And then you chase it at the worst moment all the way at the top. This is why people lose, guys. They don't lose because they're dumb. They lose because they move based on emotion. And emotion usually arrives late. That's why I keep saying the best time to position yourself, is before the crowd is certain, because certainty is expensive and doubt is cheap. So here's the bottom line. XRP is winding up. The infrastructure narrative is getting stronger. The tokenization wave is just accelerating. The settlement conversation is becoming mainstream. And the people who are laughing right now are going to be the same exact people that are asking, how did this happen so fast? It happens fast because it was built slowly behind the scenes. And that's just the secret right there. The biggest moves always look obvious in hindsight, but never feel obvious in the moment. And right now, we're still in the moment. So drop a comment right now. Do you think XRP hits $5 this cycle? And if you made it this far in the video, you already know what time it is. Smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications because I'm going to be covering this move in real time as it develops.